Hey everyone, it's Penguin Bond here with Bushi for Gaming. We have not done an unscripted Friday in a little bit, and I did want to just take this first second to apologize for that. Life has been a little hectic, and, well, you know how it goes. But today I am joined by Sergeant Angel. She is our resident artist, so if you guys have any of our mats or have won any of our mats, she is the brains behind the beautiful art that you have in front of you. So, Angel, if you want to say hello.
Hi. Well, thank you for the kind words. And yeah, I'm excited to be on this Unscripted Friday video and to chat about Digimon because it's something I really enjoy. And yeah, if any of you guys have the mats, I hope you enjoy the artwork on them because they've been a lot of fun to do.
It's a labor of love, as they say.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So, just to give everyone a little bit of a background on you and Digimon, what originally, when the game first came out, what drew you into it? Was it just that you had a connection with it as a child, so you wanted to see what it was about, or you really liked the direction it was going?
Part is because of the nostalgia. I feel like that's probably what pulls a lot of people into the game, definitely. But I'm also have been kind of a dabbler in card games, and I'm sure like many of the people who played Digimon, getting into Yu-Gi-Oh as a kid and the Pokemon card game. Kind of embedded this enjoyment of card games in me. So I've kind of played off and on different card games like Magic. I did a bit of digital card games like Hearthstone. So and I also played the original Digimon card game back in the day when I was a kid. The one by was it Upper Deck, I think, but based on the original Japanese card game, I think. But yeah, I when I saw that they were doing a new one, I was really excited. The mechanics looked really interesting, and I also just like the idea of kind of jumping into a brand new card game. So that's definitely what pulled me in, and I just like seeing some of the mechanics, like the security mechanism remind me a little bit of another card game that I used to play as a kid, Duel Masters. I don't know if you were ever into that or played it before, but there was a lot that was kind of familiar to me, and so I thought, why not give it a go, try it out.
Duel Masters definitely was a popular one. Sort of like
Yes.
you, I played not the original Digimon, but I played the original Yu-Gi-Oh back in like the '90s,
Yep.
and that was the very last time I played Yu-Gi-Oh. So I couldn't even tell you what the new rules are. Couldn't tell you what the new cards are. All I can tell you is the Lord of D and Dark Magician. That's about it.
No, I played off and on for a little bit, and I think it was around the GX era that I kind of dropped off of it. I've always thought about going back, but I kept hearing people saying it's getting really convoluted, and it's kind of a game for diehards only. So that put me off of jumping in. So I think that was the other appeal of Digimon, that it was like a brand new thing. It wasn't tied to previous card games, so there wouldn't be the kind of rules bloat that and power creep that eventually happens when a game's been going on for so long.
Now, speaking of how everything happened in Yu-Gi-Oh, where it basically turned into this whole tier zero, you pretty much play one of two decks or you lose. Digimon unfortunately hit that phase a little bit with honestly probably starting with blue hybrid, going into yellow hybrid, going into Melga. What do you take away from that time? Like, obviously, you probably played from BT. I started at BT4. And there were great cards. I mean, you could play Cranium on back then and it would be fine. You could play some of the BT4 sets and you'd be fine. Even BT5 was okay, but it felt like once Blue Hybrid and Yellow Hybrid really got a foothold, it seemed like the game went to a one to two decks, or you pretty much are just playing to play.
I started with the release special booster set, so like the BT 1 to 3 combined rollout, and I agree. I felt like there was a lot more deck variety, and there was more opportunity for dark horses to kind of emerge, and there wasn't this necessarily this feeling of a kind of like solidified meta. Because I remember dabbling with a couple of different decks when I started during the first set. I was trying out like Ragnar Lordmon, and there were a couple other deck combos that and it was just the fun of it, like being able to kind of run several different decks and different like color groupings seemed more exciting. And yeah, I agree. I felt it really hard with BT7 was when the blue hybrid stuff started dropping, right?
I do believe so. Yes.
Yeah, that was not fun. And that was a time I had kind of main blue from the beginning just because blue's my favorite color. But I also like a lot of the Digimon that are involved with it thematically, like the Garurumon line, Gabumon line is one of my favorites. But I thought about trying out Blue Hybrid just to kind of continue that, but I just thought, this is not fun. The play style is not fun to me. Playing against it is not fun to me. And it just really felt like something was shifting for the worse. And I think from then onwards, I kind of stuck with it. I was trying out Yellow Hybrid for a bit, and then I think by the time BT9 rolled around with Melga kind of dominating, I felt a little guilty because I'm like, well, on the one hand, it's my favorite evolution line, but on the other, this feels really dirty. Just the kind of dominance that it had in the meta, but also just this sense that you needed all your pieces, and that made it kind of unfun to play as well, because I think the joy of Digimon was not, you could kind of make different evolution lines work, and that's also what I really enjoy about Digimon thematically. This idea that you can something can become anything else. It's not like Pokemon where everything has a defined evolution path. There's always that meme that you see running around about like a lion turning into a refrigerator and getting guns, and I'm like, that's Digimon, right? So I like that the early card game supported that, where as long as you were in the correct like color groupings, you could do some wacky Digivolution combos, and it felt more like you could kind of play with what you had and make that work. And then I think by the time I was trying out, Melga and BT9, I'm just kind of like, if I don't have my Were Garurumon, if I don't have the exact pieces I need, I'm not going to win. I can't I can't pull off the OTK or the major security checks. And it just felt bad. It didn't feel fun anymore. It didn't feel like I could just kind of keep going and try something out and pull like a miracle outcome. It was just like, do I have my combo, my stack? Yes, I win. If I don't, that's it. Or it's a race to get the stack. And that was, I think, a similar feeling. Well, Blue Hybrid was a little different, but Blue Hybrid just kind of had that oppressive feeling of like, I'm gonna lock you down, you can't attack anymore. And I think both are kind of gameplay, mechanisms that I think are really unfun to both play and play against. So that left a sour taste in my mouth, and I basically stopped. BT10 was the last set that I played, and I've kind of dropped out of the game since.
Now, like you were saying about the decks being oppressive, I mean, if you look at the most recent April regionals, again, shout out to Eggman for always putting these lists out. Great list. The top 16 decks, there were 9 Crosshearts. Now, granted, 5 Minerva, 4x7, but I don't think that really matters in the grand scheme of things. When you have 9 of one deck, 2 Beelzemon, 1 Mervamon, 1 BWGX, 1 Ancient Grey, 1 Security Control, and 1 Examon. There's clearly a favorite there that people are like, if I play this, I can pretty much do well with it, regardless of what happens. With, like you said, Blue Hybrid, Melga especially, and sorry for you for liking Melga. I absolutely hated that deck. I do not like Blue. I feel like Digimon has a big, we're going to run Blue or you're not going to win. But with all that being said, do you feel like, even just the one of Minervamon, the one of Ancient Grey, do you feel like having, what is this, 5, 6 different decks in a top 16 gives some hope? Like, people can be like, oh, Ancient Grey did well, so maybe I can? Or do you see it more as there's 9 Crosshearts, next set there's going to be 9 Hunters, next set after that there's going to be 9 Shine or whatever comes out? Do you see it as this is more so giving hope, or this is more so giving the illusion of you're pretty much playing one deck or you're losing?
Difficult problem to balance across card games. There's always this idea of kind of like an established meta, and there's always going to be dark horses or people who kind of break out of the meta by trying something else. It's hard for me to tell exactly, just because I don't know the current state of the meta as it is. It feels a little encouraging just to see that there's a little bit of deck variety in there, because from what I remember, I was seeing a lot of Blackboard Greymon X, and that seemed quite dominant for a while too. So I don't know if things have kind of shifted around. I know there have been like restrictions, but it didn't look like the restrictions towards Blackboard Gray were that important. And that's the other thing that I felt like burned me out a little bit with Bandai's handling of kind of ban lists. I felt like at times it just kind of didn't really make sense. The time that really kind of made me question what they were thinking was with BT10. I think they effectively handed out what was the band that they put out towards I think a certain Crossheart card, but it felt like the set had only been out for a couple weeks and they were already killing the decks, the core decks of the set before
It
the
was
Western meta even got
X4.
together.
X4 came out, and then literally a week later, they were like, "Hey, we're gonna restrict that."
Yeah, no, and it's like I've kind of respected that Bandai usually takes the approach where Japan has a different ban list than the West, but it's also like I don't know why they didn't really stick to that because we didn't know how the meta was necessarily going to shake out here. It always looks like I think. From what I understand, it's because the Western meta plays to best of three versus Japan's best of one. So what's
Mm-hmm.
dominant there is not necessarily going to be what's dominant here either. So it just feels like they do these weird kind of half bandaged solutions to things that don't necessarily work. But I don't actually know what the solution is. I don't know if it's just to design, less combo heavy decks and do it more based on color archetypes so that, different combinations will be able to shine. That could be part of it. I do know that historically some colors have had problems. I know Black really didn't have a good time of it for a while, and I'm sorry for that as a blue supporter. And let me tell you, I still felt very guilty playing Melga, even though I like the Digimon, but just that it's not a fun deck. I'm like, yes, you can win with it, but it's just you're sitting around fishing for your important card. It's like I just want to play. This isn't fun. But yeah, I don't know if it's a matter of just kind of getting all of the colors to be more viable and then having more variety based on that.
Well,
What
it's
about the Crossheart decks right now are making them so strong in this current meta?
honestly, I think it's a lot of the same problem that they had with Blue Hybrid, where you're basically swinging, and not 9 times out of 10, because 90% is a little much, but you run, even if you just run 10 Tamers in a 50 card deck, you're gonna see at least one pop out of security, maybe two.
Right.
And the fact that every single tamer plays out of security, there's not one where it's like, oh, there's no security effect, you or add it to your hand. Like One Piece is a lot of they do have triggers, but you can also add it to your hand to use it later. With
Mm-hmm.
Digimon, it's pretty much if you hit a tamer, it's coming out, and as you know with Blue Hybrid, it was if you hit Tommy, you pretty much just lose. Like there's nothing stopping that. But with
Right.
Cross Hearts, if you hit the trio, if you hit Taiki, like if you honestly, if you hit any of them and have a card in hand to play off of it, or if you can then next turn ramp into something, it's just that tamer heavy where it just straight plays and it gets a little hard to deal with. Even with oh god, what's that option? The Gaia Force, not Gaia Force. Wow, I'm blanking on it. But it's the black red option now that basically kills up
Oh, the
to
dark Gaia Force, right? Or
Dark Gaia Force. There
yeah,
we
yeah.
go. But it can kill the tamers and everything. But most people are running one or two copies, and
I do remember that. Yeah, yeah.
that's going to be great for the first set of tamers, maybe the second set of tamers, but not the third set of tamers. And that's the biggest problem I think that X7 is giving people is it just runs so many tamers and it's blue hybrid but with multiple colors.
Got it. That makes sense. Yeah, I know that tamers have always been kind of a problem, and in terms of how sticky they are on the board. Because yes, we've had a couple of seen different versions of tamer removal, but they all seem really expensive. And like you said, it's not something that you can run very often. There was one of the Lucimons, right, was able to get rid of tamers as well, but it didn't really feel, on paper you think, ooh, I can get rid of tamers, it's really strong, but I think it just kind of doesn't pan out, or it's not really efficient to have that much tamer removal. So I don't know if that would help, if that would just kind of make the win condition a little bit harder, if there was a bit more risk for tamers on the board, or if that they weren't able to kind of come out of security so easily. And I think
Why?
just the idea of tamer removal is also a little funny because it's like I'm sure Bandai doesn't want to keep encouraging the murder of children, but
Yeah, that would be bad. I know with the next set with Hunters, though, I mean, Hunters, again, it's going to be a big tamer thing, but they have Quartz, which is the new Digimon coming out that can suspend everything when it's Digivolved and then gains memory based on what's suspended, which, yeah, has some tamer hate in there because you can't tap the tamer to use it and it doesn't unsuspend on your opponent's turn. But to me, that just feels like it's going to create a whole nother issue where it's, okay, we went from X7, now we're going to go to Hunter. Like, everyone's going to play Hunter, everything's suspended. It's like you said, you're just going to sit there and stare at each other, and it's like watching paint dry. Like, who can get their pieces first? Okay, you win.
It just really seems weird to me that that's the direction that the game is going in, because I just, those kind of environments of play just seem inherently unfun to me. And it's like, I don't know how much of the, I was looking at some of the newer sets they announced, like the Ace decks.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how much it's like, effectively those Digivolutions are like hand traps. I don't remember how it quite worked, but I know that like the Ace Metal Gurumon and the War Greymon, you could kind of Digivolve from hand. I don't know if that will kind of help in terms of unpredictability. I'm also not a big fan of hand trap style gameplay coming out of like, you know, Yu-Gi-Oh, and there's a little bit of that with Magic, I guess. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if the answer is to kind of create more unpredictability instead of this environment, because that's the issue right now, right? Everything is predictable. It's like you get your stack, you get your pieces, you get, you know, the win condition, or you lock everybody else down, and it's kind of a stalemate until somebody is able to pull out of the lockdown, right? And I don't know if having more variety or more, you know, volatile elements will help. I really don't know.
Well, it's like you said about the Ace deck. There was a really good Reddit post by Dave Cron on the Digimon card game 2020. If anyone wants to go check it out, it is up on the screen. But basically, going over, you know, there's a lot of people who got really salty about the Ace set coming out, thinking that, you know, it's basically just going to be you put it on the board, you win the game. But he does make a point where the cards have downsides. You overlook keywords that you can't evolve for blast, you can't do certain plays, you do lose memory if something happens to it. There is a lot of downside, but to sort of give you the benefit there is also a lot of, again, you've hit hand traps. You're starting to add counters to a game that when you started had no counters. When I started had no counters. You're taking what, 11, 12 sets of Digimon now and being like, okay, it's been okay, but we've had a few issues, so let's flip it on its head. Let's do this. Let's see what happens now. And it's like, is it really still the same game?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, that is kind of initially what drew me to the game. You know, I liked, yeah, it felt like in the early days it struck a slightly better balance in terms of, you know, uh, having variety, but also not having this constant one-upping style of gameplay of, you know, counter this, counter that endlessly. That's not really something that I personally enjoy, because I like approaching the game and the playstyle as a bit of a puzzle. You know, it's just like, okay, this is what I have in my hand, this is what's on the board, this is what's my opponent's board, and then you have the element of unpredictability with security. And I think that is part of the problem as well. It's like if you have a meta that's very tamer heavy, that unpredictability is kind of gone, and you're kind of punished for going after security, right? Because the you hit security, you hit a tamer into security. That's a huge upside for your opponent, because then they don't have to spend the memory to put the tamer down. You know, and that swings the momentum in their favor. So I'm sure that's part of it. I'm sure that's what's driving this kind of meta into the unhealthy state, because you want to feel like, you know, yes, there is a danger to hitting security, but not to the degree that it currently is. And since something like, yeah, the hybrid deck and the cross hearts deck all relied super heavily on tamers, and it's like before you'd have decks that had or wanted to have tamers in them, but not at those ratios, right? Like you didn't see that level of kind of, you know, tamers running rampant. But with hybrids and crossheart, it's absolutely essential. That's how you set up your board. That's how you know, with crossheart, that's how you're able to do the digivolves and get your presence on board. And same with hybrids, you turn into the hybrids generally are a bit scary and unhealthy because of that. But
Well, it's
yeah,
like you said, it creates that predictability. Like if you see someone across from you flip over three cards, you know exactly what their deck is. And 9 times out of 10, if it's a cross, if it's a Melga, especially with Melga, there was really three good ways to build it, but they all centered around the same cards. So if you saw that egg hatch and you saw the first two, you knew what was happening. And it's
yep,
either you try to win very quickly or you lost.
Yeah, no, that was definitely an issue, and that's why I'm like, the idea that there should be deck archetypes or cards that support each other makes sense, but I think with builds like, with BT9 kind of more oriented around the whole X antibody lines, and then also with hybrid decks and crossheart decks, I think there's just the problem. I remember trying to build a crossheart deck, and the problem is that there's just no room to build it any other way if you want it to work. And I think that's the problem. I think maybe they need to look at kind of deck and card synergies as smaller archetypes and being less kind of, this is the entire package that you need to play in order to play this card or this group of cards functionally. Maybe that will help in terms of kind of variety. Maybe it'll help making it so that it's not a situation where, yeah, if you see somebody flip their first egg and you're like, okay, I know what's going on here now, and this is your deck is not going to have that much variance in it. There's really no room for you to surprise me. I remembered looking at that with I think Melga had that problem definitely too. I think with hybrids there was a little bit of room, but still it's like there's like such a concrete ratio that you need to play to make it functional of tamers or the Evo lines. And maybe that's just something that they need to look at. Maybe there needs to be less kind of strict synergy across certain groupings of cards.
That makes sense. I mean, I'm still in the camp that Bandai is putting out this One Piece, and I'm a little salty because the One Piece product has not been available. But then you got Battle Spirits Universe, or not Universe, but the Union Arena, and then Dragon Ball. They're still trying to do. It's like they're trying to do a lot right now, and it feels like something's going to get shafted somewhere, unfortunately. But we got
True.
two more questions here for you. First one being one idea that has floated around, at least with my group I talked to. We do not like the eggs. Like, the eggs are great, raising is great, but it feels like raising has too much protection. Would you consider a move back to the game if there was a way to actually interact with the raising? If there was a way to stop your opponent from digivolving and raising, or to make your opponent not be able to move out for a turn. Now, I'm not just talking about like Digimon Emperor, where it's like, oh, if they move a level 3 out, you gain 2 memory, or Sakuyamon, oh, when they come out, it's -3 checks. Those are 2 cards. But in essence, that only affects it, again, when it moves out. If I can't stop you from digivolving down there, you can move out whenever you want. You could just kill my thing first and then move out. But would you give it more of a try if they did something where it's like, oh, you can't digivolve in raising, or oh, this turn something else happens to the raising area, if they made it a little bit more accessible to defend?
Definitely be curious to see how that plays out. From my experience, I know that was a big problem with BT9, right? Because you just made like the unkillable. Well, it wasn't an unkillable stack, but you made a very strong stack. You had a lot of protections, and the problem is removal is quite expensive in this game. I mean, I appreciate that because then it's not this kind of, I build a thing, haha, it's gone. But I know that got really unhealthy for DT9, and again, that was kind of the meta where I really began to lose my enjoyment of the game. Despite my favorite Digimon line being meta, it still wasn't fun, and I just didn't like that. The amount of protection and just watching, kind of helplessly as your opponent builds insecurity, and knowing that they're going to be able to get something out, something good out, and that you'd have to commit quite a bit of resources to get rid of it, is difficult. So yeah, I'd be curious to see if a change like that, where you can interact a bit more with the raising area of your opponent, maybe makes the game a little less kind of in a feeling, removing that feeling of inevitability, if that makes sense. I can see
Yeah,
that perhaps helping, but I think the problem is I don't know quite how that manifests in the current metas, because I know that would have been a game changer in BT9 from my experience.
100%. Honestly, BT9, like you said, was just sitting there like watching a giant T-Rex come at you, and you were just like, okay, I'm going to go sit on the John and just let it eat me. Why not?
Yeah, exactly.
But last question we got here. So with all of this, I mean, we've talked a little bit about the new decks that are topping, the new decks that are coming out, the old decks. Was your choosing to be done Digimon strictly based on where the direction of the game was going, or did it have anything to do with the community or anything like that? I know some people have different feelings on the community. Some people are obviously very for it. Some people are very against it. I'm in the middle. I really don't care as long as the person across from me is cool. As long as you're cool, I'll play with anyone. But what was like your? I know the set and Melga was your end all be all, but what really was there any other factors that led into that?
Yeah, I think part of it was, I mean, seeing things like that ban list come out for BT10, and just thinking like, Bandai is not giving a chance for the meta to shake out, and just kind of handing out this unilateral ban list at the same time as Japan. I'm like, I wasn't a fan of Crossheart. I didn't watch that anime series. I didn't have a kind of, commitment to that deck, but I just didn't really like what it signaled in terms of them not really taking as much care for a set that just came out, and not even having time to really see how the meta would shake out. That left a really bad taste in my mouth, definitely. I mean, my the group that I played with at locals has been cool, and it was nice to be able to play with them. I was also doing some webcam tournaments for a time, and there was a time, I guess, like the honeymoon period of the game, where people were quite chill. I was actually really impressed with how the community was. But as time kind of went on, I have this a recollection of around, I think, EX2, when things started getting a little bit more toxic. I wouldn't say full toxic, but I had a couple more, opponents that were kind of rude to me. And so I kind of abandoned webcam tournaments altogether. The time that I was doing them a lot was during really COVID, when there also wasn't really a large kind of community group that was playing Digimon locally. So that was kind of the only choice I had to play. And I think also really, the fact that there's no online client still, like an official one. I found myself drifting more and more towards playing digital card games. I play the Pokemon trading card game online occasionally. I haven't played for a while, but I liked having that option of kind of dipping in and playing. It also just helps with like learning card interactions, learning rules, and things like that. So I've always been kind of holding out hope that they'll put out an online client. I think if that ever happens, I'd definitely be open to coming back. But as it stands, having to collect all these cards and go to locals, it's a lot of a time commitment. And I found that since I've stopped playing, I've had more time to do other things. And if the game continued to be kind of fun in the way that I remember it, I would have loved to continue. But yeah, all of those factors kind of contributed towards me drifting away from it. And I think, the core thing I think that would bring me back is, if for some reason the game transforms to a place where it gets really fun, and everyone promises me that it's really fun, or if an online client comes out, definitely that's something I'd give a try. I know that I think they're working on a Dragon Ball Super one, right? I know they've been testing that or something.
I know there's been talk about it, but I mean I'm right there with you on the online thing. When I left Magic originally, that was because the cards were expensive to collect, but then they had Magic Online, and it's like, okay, yeah, I have to pay a little to get the packs, but I can also just play and get packs for free, or play a starter deck just to get back into the rules of it if I ever do want to go. So I'm not like rusty to it. But with no online client, it's very hard to drop out for 3, 4, 5 sets, come back and be like, oh, now the game has changed. What is going on?
Yeah, exactly. No, the thing you mentioned about the starter deck too, that was one of the reasons I enjoyed playing the Pokemon Online game client, because they have a game format where you just play starter decks against each other, and yeah, it gets stale as hell, but it's like, if I just randomly want to play, I can get that experience of just kind of hopping in, not really having to think about collecting, or yeah, like you said, like buying cards or anything like that. You can just play a bit casually, and it's great. I like the flexibility that offers. And that's, it's a little annoying thinking about it, because it's like Digimon literally means digital monsters, and yet there's no digital version of the card game. It just doesn't make any sense to me. I'm sure it's difficult to come up with a system, but I think that'll grow the reach of the game. I am actually really curious to see how many people are still playing. I know, kind of like the problems you mentioned with One Piece, it was really hard to get product for a while, because of hype and because of COVID and production issues. But I don't know how the player base is compared to how it was at the height of when it came out. I don't know if more people are leaving because of the card interactions, the meta, the play styles. I'm curious to see. I don't know if you have any like insight or information on that.
I mean, I know a few of the diehard people that used to play when One Piece came out. They're like, I'm gonna go try that because Unfortunately, there was a little bit of money in it, so people were like, I'm going to go try it. In worst case scenario, I could just sell everything I got and probably make my profit back. But then they started to play it and they were like, oh, this is actually really fun. It gives you a different sort of interaction. Like, yeah, you can counter and add DP to your creatures, but it's not like Yu-Gi-Oh! Where you're countering and being like, oh, I'm going to add 3 million to this and kill that and make you do 6 different steps. Like, it's only 2 interactions. I think the most common ones are like you get plus 4,000 and then you can kill something on your opponent's field, but that's the end of it. And it gave you a lot more room to think and strategize, whereas Digimon, like we've said this whole video, it was build big stack go burr. Like, it felt like caveman times. And
Right.
that was mainly just, most of the people that I know that have dropped out of Digimon, that's pretty much why. Me, myself, I'm on a hiatus until BT 13 when Craniumon and Royal Knights come out, because I love Craniumon. I will play a new Craniumon deck when that comes out, 110%. But until then, I don't see myself like being hardcore at locals, because as much as I want to build hunters, I don't want to go play a bunch of mirror matches and then have my face melted off. Like, it's just not cool.
Yeah, totally understandable. And I mean, I get the feeling too, and it's like that was one thing I forgot to mention. I don't remember what set it is that's coming out. I don't know if is it BT14 they've been teasing, but I am also excited for the new Digimon that they announced as part of the Seekers project, Lugamon. I'd like to see. I might be persuaded to come back to just build a Lugamon deck for old time's sake, but my thoughts are like either it's going to be trash and unplayable, or it's going to be super hyper meta and then everyone's going to hate it and it's not going to be fun to play, like you said, like 1,000 mirror matches. I have no idea, but that was always the draw of the game, right? Just seeing, oh, can you build a deck around your favorites? And it's a shame that there's so many different problems surrounding that where you kind of can't, because if black is underperforming for a whole set, where it's like, I could build a Craniumon deck, or I could like lose a bunch, and it's super unfair.
I mean, even with Dark Knightmon, they tied it in with purple, and it's like, okay, yeah, it's still mainly black, but it's all dual color cards, because I guess we couldn't have a solo one. And the only solo one really left is Commandramon, but Commandramon's great, but it's very, you win fast, you lose fast. There's not really much of an in-between with that deck. It's fun, it's beautiful, but... And of course, my other favorite deck was Eosmon, and that was never meta.
Oh yeah, what a shame. I always was really amused by the playstyle of that deck and that card, and it's a shame that it didn't really get its time to shine at all.
Yeah, it's a sad one. But I did want to say thank you for coming out. Thank you for, telling us about your experience with it. It's been great having you. Great having another opinion on it all.
Likewise, this was really fun. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And everyone, of course, click, like, subscribe, all that fun stuff. The Discord group is in our YouTube profile. So you can hop in there if you ever want to talk Digimon, talk One Piece, talk Battle Spirits, talk My Hero. As you can see, there's a lot of card games we talk about, and that's probably part of Bandai's fault. But hey, what you gonna do? But till next time, everyone, have a great day, great evening, great whatever you are having, and we will see you around.